everybody. On behalf of the state of Alabama and the Gulf Restoration Council, and for those of us here in Alabama, usually known as the Federal Council, I want to welcome you to the webinar today about the Restore Act. This is Patty Powell. I am State Lands Director for the Alabama Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. And I want to tell you who else we have in the room today. On behalf of the state of Alabama also, I have Hank Birch, who some of you who've been to our Five Rivers Delta Resource Center may know. He's our manager here and also serves as primary assistant to me for the Restore Act. I also have Alyssa Morgan with our department, who both serves as executive director for the Alabama Council under the Restore Act, and also wears a second hat generally for my division as a coastal restoration coordinator. On behalf of the Gulf Restoration Council, again the federal council to most of us, I have with me today Ben Skaggs, sorry Ben, I couldn't say her name, Ben Skaggs, Deputy Executive Director for the Council, and Bethany Kraft, who serves as External Affairs Director. Bethany and I are going to primarily walk you through the webinar today, but I have encouraged Alyssa and Hank and Ben to step in either where we have forgotten something or maybe have said something slightly incorrectly, or just if they think of something they think might be helpful to add. So you might hear them chime in from time to time. And I want to thank Bethany Kraft, who has organized the webinar and logistics today, and I'm counting on her to keep us technically up and running. So I appreciate that more than she knows. I want to tell you what we're going to do today, just a little bit of an overview of the webinar. The first thing we're going to run through is just a very high-level, brief summary of the Restore Act to kind of give you an idea of the various provisions of that act, and also a description of the Restore Council. Again, those in Alabama commonly hear me refer to that council as the Federal Council. But the Federal Restore Council's role under the Restore Act, I want to also present some questions that have been presented by the Federal Restore Council that the Council has both posted on their website and asked for feedback from the public, so I want to go over those. And then finally, wanted to give an overview of exactly what the state of Alabama's role is under the Restore Act in various capacities. So that is just an overview of what we're going to cover. I'm going to turn over to Bethany to sort of describe logistics and get us going.
Good afternoon, everybody. So we're about to start the presentations. We've muted your lines, and this webinar will be presented in listen-only mode. However, if you have questions, you can ask them using the question feature in the right-hand column of your webinar control panel. We've reserved a lot of time after these presentations to go through and answer those. So we're going to start with an overview of the Restore Act and an update from the Gulf Coast Ecosystem Restoration Council, or the Federal Council, as many people know it in Alabama. The Restore Act was passed into law in 2012, and it envisions a regional approach to restoring the long-term health of the valuable natural ecosystems and economy of the Gulf Coast region. The Restore Act dedicates 80% of any civil and administrative penalties paid under the Clean Water Act by responsible parties in connection with the Deepwater Horizon oil spill to a Gulf Restoration Trust Fund. And you'll see the breakdown of this trust fund on your screen. And it's administered by the U.S. Department of Treasury. I just want to give you a quick update on where the Department of Treasury is. They are responsible for issuing compliance and auditing procedures for the entire Restore Act. They also administer 2 grant programs under the Act. Treasury issued an interim final rule in August 2014, and it became final yesterday, actually. Now that the rule is finalized, money from the trust fund can begin to flow if all other programmatic requirements are met. The Restore Act also establishes a Gulf Coast Ecosystem Restoration Council as an independent entity in the federal government. The membership of the council is comprised of the governors of the 5 Gulf Coast states and cabinet-level officials from 6 federal agencies. It's chaired by the Department of Commerce. You can learn more about the council's membership and history on our website at restorethegulf.gov. So back to the flow chart here. The Federal Council has responsibilities related to 60% of the funds made available from this Gulf Restoration Trust Fund. You'll see those circled here in red. 30% of the trust fund plus interest will be used for ecosystem restoration and protection by the council, and this work is guided by a comprehensive plan. The other 30% will be allocated to the Gulf Coast states under a formula described in the Restore Act and spent according to individual state expenditure plans. I'll provide you some basic information about the council's work in these two areas, and then you'll hear from Patty in the state of Alabama with additional Alabama-specific information. First, we're going to do a quick update about the spill impact component, which many people know as Bucket 3. Again, the spill impact component represents 30% of the trust fund that will be allocated to the Gulf Coast states and spent on programs and projects identified in what's known as state expenditure plans, or SEPs. These plans will be drafted by the states and then submitted to the chair of the Federal Restore Council for approval. Each state has a different process to develop their state expenditure plans, and in just a few minutes, the state of Alabama will provide additional information on their process for developing their state expenditure plan. The Federal Council published an interim final rule in August 2014 to allow states to access up to 5% of the funds available under Bucket 3 for planning activities associated with developing their state expenditure plans. The Council must also publish a regulation to administer the spill impact component. This regulation will also establish the final oil spill impact formula, which is what will determine how much funding each state will receive. Every state is guaranteed a minimum of 5% of the funds available under the spill impact component. Now I'll provide a brief overview of the Council-selected restoration component, or Bucket 2. This component represents 30% of the Gulf Restoration Trust Fund and is to be spent on projects and programs that restore and protect the natural resources and ecosystems in the Gulf of Mexico region. One of the Council's primary responsibilities under this component is to develop a comprehensive plan to guide this work. The initial comprehensive plan was approved in August of 2013, and it provides a framework to implement a coordinated Gulf Coast region-wide restoration effort. This plan that was approved in August of last year is the first version of a plan that will change over time. The plan establishes the Council's goals for the region, which were developed based on the findings and recommendations of the Gulf Coast Ecosystem Restoration Task Force and also from thousands of public comments. The Council has chosen to focus for this first round of funding on the following two goals: restore and conserve habitat and restore water quality. However, we recognize that projects are likely to meet multiple goals and objectives of the comprehensive plan. This is a screenshot of the Restore the Gulf website. You can download and read the initial comprehensive plan by going to restorethegulf.gov and clicking on the picture on the right side of the home page. You'll see it circled there in red. In July 2014, the Council approved a proposal evaluation process that it will use to select and fund projects and programs under Bucket 2, the Council's selected restoration component. There's a lot of information on this slide. I'll go over the basics of the Council process today, and then in a few moments, the state of Alabama will provide you with specific details for Alabama. You can also find detailed information about the process and download fact sheets and member submission guidelines at restorethegulf.gov if you're a real glutton for punishment. In step 1, the Council members will submit their proposals to the Council entity. According to the Restore Act, only members can submit proposals. So if you have a project idea, you'll need to work with the individual members. Patty's going to provide you with more details about this in just a few moments. Again, for this first round of projects, which will be contained in a document known as a Funded Priorities List, or FPL, the Council members chose to focus on projects that will have as their primary goal restoring and conserving habitat or water quality. The Council members will also articulate in their proposals how the projects submitted are foundational in nature, meaning how are they the best first step, if they're sustainable, how likely they are to succeed, and if they have benefits to the community. Once the proposal is submitted, evaluation and vetting activities will begin. First, projects will be reviewed to ensure that they are eligible for funding, meaning that they're allowable under the Restore Act. They will will also be reviewed to ensure that the budget is reasonable. Once the proposal is determined to be eligible, it will be reviewed in 3 primary areas, or engines as we like to call them. The first is a science evaluation engine, which will include information about how each proposal has established the use of best available science and has described the scientific basis for the proposed activity. Now, this science evaluation will be conducted by an external review panel consisting of experts located both within and outside the Gulf region who possess extensive restoration expertise. Each proposal will be reviewed by 3 experts. Next, we have the priority and commitment to plan review. This review evaluates each project to ensure that the proposal addresses one or more of the priority criteria outlined in the Restore Act and that the project meets the commitments made in the initial comprehensive plan. Those commitments are on pages 8 and 9 of your comprehensive plan if you are following along. The Environmental Compliance Readiness Review identifies the status of all environmental compliance requirements for the proposal. Now, just a note here, all of the proposals and all of the reports generated during these reviews will be posted online at restorethegulf.gov. The council members will use this information to determine which projects will be included on a draft funded priorities list. This draft list will then be published for public comment and review. Here is a screenshot of our website where you can find detailed information about the project selection process. Just click on Our Work and then Council Selected Restoration Components. Now I'm going to go over just a few highlights that you need to know about this process. And then Patty, in just a moment, will cover any state-specific requirements. The first is that the submission window for members opened on August 21st, and it will close no earlier than November 17th of this year. Each state and federal member of the council, remember there are 11, are responsible for proposing restoration projects and programs for consideration by the council as a whole. Each council member may submit a maximum of 5 projects to the council for consideration. That means that every council member will not be able to submit every project that they receive to the council, and everything that's submitted to the council will not be able to be included on the funded priorities list. Now, the amount of funding available for this first FPL, for this first round of funding, is approximately $150 to $180 million. But we know that this is just the first go-around, and we expect that future amendments to this project list will include both larger projects and larger project lists that reflect the full amount available to be spent for restoration activities. And of course, there will be additional public input opportunities at that time. Finally, council members each have different methods to gather project submission ideas. You can review the council members' submission guidelines online and the ways that they collect project ideas at restorethegulf.gov. And in just a couple of minutes, Patty will provide you additional information about how to submit projects through Alabama's portal. So again, here's where you can go for details, to download submission guidelines, and also to find information about how to submit project ideas to council members. Just click on Our Work and then Council Selected Restoration Component. The council welcomes all public input, including feedback on project and program ideas. And in providing this input, we also ask that you consider the following questions. I'm going to give you just a couple of minutes to read these. We're not going to have an input session today, but if you're interested in providing your input to the council on these questions or any feedback that you have, you can email us at the restorethegulf.gov. That's the email address at the bottom of your screen, and we would love to hear from you. The input that we collect will be compiled into a report and combined with previous public input received over the past 4 years to provide additional information to the council members about which projects are most likely to be supportive of the vision and restoration outcomes the public wants to see. Again, you can email your thoughts on these. I know you might want to take some time to think about them and send them to restorethegulf.gov. This concludes the federal council portion of the webinar. Now I'm going to turn it over to Patty and the state of Alabama. When they finish with their presentation, we'll begin our question and answer period.
Thanks, Bethany, and everyone forgive the noise. You may hear chairs roll a little bit here. And then I also want to emphasize, as Bethany mentioned, after you've had time to look at the questions, do provide your feedback to the Federal Council email address that you saw on the screen. That will be shared with all of the members of the Council, and that is sort of a central way to give feedback to those questions and anything else that you may want to provide to the Council as a whole. Again, I want to thank Bethany for her time in going through the Federal Council portion, and I hope that there were several screenshots of the Federal Council's website. I did ask Bethany to do that, as I hope that will give you an opportunity to go back if you have questions or can't remember how to get to the more detailed information that we mentioned. The PowerPoint will be available both on the Federal Council website as well as the Alabama website, which I'm about to talk to you about. But I hope that those screenshots would help direct you. There is a lot of excellent information on the website that Bethany has worked hard to coordinate, and also as on behalf of the state, as a member of the Council, I want to thank her for that. What you see on your screen now is a shot of Alabama's website. This is alabamacoastalrestoration.org. The Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, on behalf of the state, sort of developed this website with the idea of trying to put in one spot where you could at least go as a jumping off point to learn more about the various restoration efforts. You will see 4 icons or clicks that you can make for information about the Federal Council activities, the State of Alabama Council activities, which we'll cover in a moment, National Fish and Wildlife or NFWIF activities, and also a link related to National Resource Damage Assessment, or NRDA. So again, sometimes when you click on these links, it might send you to another website, but the point of it was trying to pull everything together in one spot. I'd also like to highlight, you can sort of see in the lower left-hand portion of the screen a spot for you to sign up for email updates. We use the emails that we receive through this website to send out various announcements about the various restoration efforts, whether it be meetings or webinars such as this one, or just general announcements. So if you have not already, please do sign up for those updates. I wanted to take a minute and go back, similar to the slide you saw earlier. This isn't very pretty, and I realize that, but I wanted to sort of orient everybody to where we were, and I'm going to pick up where Bethany left off on bucket 2, which is a little out of order. But first, I just want to run through the 5 boxes, which I guess everybody's now referring to as buckets. The first bucket and the third bucket and the 5th bucket, as you will see, have an abbreviation AGCRC. That's Alabama Gulf Coast Recovery Council, or the Alabama Council, as I tend to call it. Those 3 buckets, 1, 3, and 5, the Alabama Council has very direct roles related and responsibilities related to those. We'll get to those in a moment. The second bucket, with a state of Alabama, is a member of the Federal Council. Again, relates back to what Bethany just got through discussing. The 4th bucket you see in parentheses, no direct role. As for the state of Alabama, the state has no direct role in the administration of any proceeds that become available under that bucket. That is a science program that NOAA leads. And Bethany, I'm going to turn to Bethany just for one more second to give you a little additional information about where to learn more about that bucket.
Yeah, if you're interested in learning about the NOAA Science Program, or Bucket 4 and the Trust Fund, you can go to restoreactscienceprogram.noaa.gov. So that website again is restoreactscienceprogram.noaa.gov. And again, neither the Alabama Council or the Federal Council has any direct responsibility or authority as to that bucket. Okay, I want to move now to, again, I'm going to talk through the state of Alabama's role as a member of the Federal Council. And again, this is going to be somewhat repetitive of information Bethany gave you, but I did want to give a little bit of perspective on behalf of the state as one member of that council. I want to emphasize again, as Bethany did, that the funds under Bucket 2 are for use for ecological restoration projects and programs.
The funding that will be available for the first FPL, again, that's the funded priorities list that the council will use to set forth the projects that it intends to implement under Bucket 2. The range of proceeds is in about 150 to 180 million. That represents a decision by the council amongst the amount that would be available to the council. There would be some money held back for contingency and some administrative expenses, and basically just that is the amount of money that will the projects will constitute the first FPL. Alabama, as a member, may submit 5 proposals to the federal council for their consideration. Now, Alabama is one of 10 council members that will be seeking funds under this project, and by that I mean submitting proposals to the federal council for consideration. The Coast Guard, although a member, will not be submitting project proposals. So if you do the math, that would be 5 proposals by 10 council members for 50 proposals maximum that will be considered by the federal council. I did want to note that there is no allocation of funds. By that I mean there's no division of money. There's no amount allocated to each member, promised to each state. It truly is a bucket of money that will be allocated according to the decisions made by the federal council for projects that are selected for that FPL. So I just wanted to note that there's no specific amount guaranteed for the state of Alabama, again, or any other member. Also, as Bethany had talked about before, the council chose to focus for this first FPL on habitat and water quality. Accordingly, as state of Alabama, in reviewing potential proposals, we'll be looking at those that will address habitat and water quality issues. Overall, we will be looking for the similar factors that the council will be using, as that is because Alabama would want to see its proposals make it onto the FPL. So we will similarly focus from projects submitted to the state on habitat and water quality. The projects must be foundational and sustainable. As Bethany mentioned, foundational is what is a good first step. Alabama looks at that the same way. What is a good step to take that would lead to more work in the Gulf, or either is a logical first step looking forward to other work? Again, what you would do before proceeding with additional types of work. It's also important to us that the projects be sustainable. Any project that we would implement, we would want to be sustainable. But I want to mention that we often encourage folks to submit projects in phased manners when applicable. That way, it helps us with the amount of money that may be needed for any particular project to understand where the funds may come from. It is very, very important for Bucket 2 to remember that we don't know how much money will be ultimately available or when additional funds will come. And I say that because that means that each phase must be itself sustainable on its own. For example, if following phase 1, phase 2 work must follow in 3 years, just to use that as an example. And that would be very difficult for us to select such a proposal because we don't know when there would be more funding to finish out that work or continue the sustainability of a project. Also, we're looking for projects with a Gulf-wide significance or that benefit the Gulf-wide ecosystem. Now, again, this is, we talked about having the dollar figure to work with between $150 and $180 million. We might not be able to accomplish Gulf-wide restoration for that amount of money, but you can look at the type of work, the type of projects that can provide a benefit to the ecosystem. And accordingly, because the projects that will come to the council for consideration in order to make them on the FPL, have to flow through the federal council. It needs to be the type of projects that would appeal and have sort of a synergy with other state and federal members. And that's, to me, just a reality of this bucket. Again, there is no allocation, so we must all work together in looking at the Gulf in picking projects that would move forward for the FPL. Now, I don't really mean that projects have to physically cross state lines, but it must be the type of work that could be done in other states across the Gulf that would provide a positive ecosystem impact. or possibly it's a type of work that benefits a resource of joint interest amongst the federal and state members. But most importantly, I want to emphasize again that projects must withstand the selection process that Bethany mentioned, in which you can get detailed information on by going to actually both our websites, but you see the screenshot Bethany gave you to get to the information on the federal website. The state of Alabama will be very much mirroring and looking toward whether our proposals are a good fit and would be able to withstand the analysis under the science review, the commitment to plan, environmental readiness, basically every element that's described in that process. So the next shot you see is the Alabama website, how to submit a project. I've talked to you a lot about, as did Bethany did, sort of the criteria, the parameters of what the federal council is looking for. She also gave you a website where you could get additional information to submit projects to any member of the council. Just because you're from Alabama, for example, you can still submit suggestions to any of the members. There's several federal members you can submit to in addition to the state. But what I wanted to show you is how to be sure that the state of Alabama has your project suggestion and is able to review it. So you go to our website, you would click where it says Submit Project Suggestions. In addition to then being able to access the portal to submit your project, you can also review the project suggestions that the state has already received. At that same spot, you can print out a guide that will tell you exactly what information you need to complete all the fields of a project suggestion in Alabama's portal. Strongly suggest that you print that out first and be sure that you have that information available before you go to enter your project. Would also strongly suggest that once you, in gathering that information, put it in a Word document so you can copy and paste into the fields of our portal. Also, you will see at certain points the fields that we have given you or the information we request that you upload has size limitations. Please be very mindful where you see that and follow those. The website does not react kindly to going over any of the size limits and generally does lock up. So please take a look at that. Let me also take a minute to say that the one exception, we're taking project suggestions for anything under the Restore Act, any NIFWIF ideas that you have. You will see when you click on Submit Project Suggestion, it gives you special instructions if you still have a NERDA suggestion you'd like to make. We are still using the original NOAA portal that is the central portal for NERDA, early restoration, or just restoration suggestions in general. We are trying to keep those still going to the NOAA website. It'll be noted on there and it'll direct you there. You don't need to worry about it, but I did want to note that. If you happen to have entered a suggestion maybe a couple years ago on the NERDA site, I would ask you to re-enter onto this website. It's our Alabama Coastal Restoration website. We are obviously mindful of the projects that were entered for the NERDA phase and that work, but please do enter it on here if you want to be sure that that Alabama considers the project in the context of the Restore Act and NIFWIF. Alabama has not set what I would call a hard deadline for submittals for consideration for Bucket 2. However, realistically, it would be difficult for us to continue a detailed review of projects after the end of October. However, to the extent we can, we will, but please go ahead and put those in. But the work of the Federal Council and everything else I'm going to discuss will continue. So that doesn't mean everything for every restoration effort you have to have it in by the end of the month. But again, try to, if you can, for anything you want considered under Bucket 2. One final thing on the portal I'll mention now, so I don't have to won't talk about it too much more later. When you go on the portal and you look at other suggestions that have been entered, you will see that it starts on number 66. Many of you have heard me talk, have heard me say this before, but we ran 65 tests of the website before we went live. So excited when it was time to go live, we forgot to reset it to 1. So you're not missing 1 through 65. They just don't exist. So I hope to explain that a little bit. Okay. I want to start back with the slide that you saw to begin with. We just got through covering Bucket 2, again, when Alabama serves as a member of the Federal Council. I now want to move into Buckets 1 and Bucket 3. We will not discuss today Bucket 5 or the Centers of Excellence bucket, although the Alabama Council does have the responsibility to select Centers of Excellence and monitor that program. We were today just going through programs that are at this time more project submittal based, and so I'm going to move on in to 1 and 3. Under the Restore Act, there was a 10-member council called the Alabama Gulf Coast Recovery Council, again, AGCRC or Alabama Council. That entity was created to carry out the duties for the state of Alabama under the direct component, which is Bucket 1, and the spill impact component, Bucket 3, which Bethany told you a little bit about earlier also. And I often talk about the Alabama Council to distinguish that council from the Federal Council or the Restore Council that Bethany talked about. Each member of this 10-member council is entitled to 1 vote, and all decisions are made by a majority vote. There is no special power of any type attributed to the chair of the council. It is simply 10 members, 1 vote each, majority vote. The Alabama Council designated my department that my division sits in, the Alabama Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, to serve as the council's administrator. Now, the Department of Conservation does not have a vote or anything like that as the council. Basically, the council makes the decisions, and we are the legwork. We try to carry out and implement the decisions made by the council, and also to help with gathering project suggestions. We'll be helping prepare plans, helping with compliance issues, and monitoring of the work that's done on behalf of the Alabama Council. Now, the Alabama Council, I've said it had 10 members. As you will see, there only 2 of the members are state-based members. That would be the governor as chair, the director of the Alabama State Port Authority, which serves as vice chair. The other 8 members are local officials. Chairman of the Baldwin County Commission, President of the Mobile County Commission. Then we have the mayors of Beulah Battery, Dauphin Island, Fairhope, Gulf Shores, Mobile, and Orange Beach. These are positions held by officials in those various capacities, so they will rotate either by election or, for example, the county commissions as the chair and president may rotate. Those members will rotate. So we do have a changing of members from time to time. You'll now see on your screen, this is back to Alabama Coastal Restoration website. You will see circled where to click to learn more about the Alabama Council. Once you click there, you will see the Alabama Council's website come up. It's an automatic click to that website. The Alabama Council had a website established before the Department of Conservation became the administrator. So although we did loop their website into our overall website, it has remained a separate website, and there is a lot of information about the Alabama Council in general as well as the Restore Act on that website. Now I wanted to talk more about Bucket 1, that the Alabama Council has authority and responsibility as far as funds under that component. Those funds are split equally among the 5 states, so Alabama will receive an equal portion. The total amount available we expect in the spring would bring the total available under Bucket 1 to Alabama to approximately $56 million. Now the Alabama Council, similar to the Federal Council, is going to have some considerations to take into account, such as should it hold back a certain amount in contingency? Is it going to hold back any administrative funds, or just basically what amount of the $56 million would it anticipate to use initially under Bucket 1? The projects that will be done under Bucket 1 can be ecological and or economic projects. This is a distinction from Bucket 2, which I just spoke about, which is just ecological projects. The council will select the projects. The Federal Council, which we've been talking about, is not involved and does not have a role as to Bucket 1. the Alabama Council will have to develop and then submit to Treasury for approval a multi-year implementation plan, or an MIP. This would be the list of projects similar to the FPL you heard us talk about under Bucket 2 that the Federal Council will be preparing. Now, I also want to mention at this point, to me, this is one reason why I think the Restore Act gets so complicated. For the various buckets, you have different eligibility requirements, again, such as Bucket 2 being just ecological. Bucket 1 and 3 can be ecological and or economic projects and programs. For the buckets, you have different decision makers, different approvals that must be obtained, different names for each plan under those, and different section of the Treasury regulations. And this is one reason the Treasury regulations might seem so long, but it is very helpful to take time to go through those regulations. And again, they are divided in a manner that help you sort of keep straight which component has which requirements. Now again, speaking of the Alabama Council under Bucket 1, which again will be preparing the multi-year implementation plan. The next step for the Alabama Council is to post for public review and comment its project selection process. The Council is still in the final stages of developing that. This is something that the Council committed to the public to do. It's not required under the Treasury regulations, simply something the Alabama Council wanted to do to gather as much public feedback on the selection process as possible. And if you signed up on our website for email updates, you'll be amongst the first to know when that is available and posted for public review. Now, skipping over to Bucket 3, the spill impact component. Under this bucket, there's $240 million that would be available for all states. Now, unlike the Bucket 1 split, we don't really know the amount available for Alabama yet. The Federal Council is working and will issue a regulation that will give more detail as the allocation formula for the state. We do know, under the Restore Act, that no state would receive less than 5%, so there is a minimum. Bucket 3, similar to Bucket 1, anticipates that you will submit ecological and or economic restoration projects and programs. However, under Bucket 3, those projects must be consistent with a comprehensive plan that Bethany talked about and had circled on that screenshot earlier that was developed and published by the Federal Council. So that is an additional requirement under Bucket 3. The Alabama Council, similar as I discussed in Bucket 1, will prepare a state expenditure plan or an SEP that will outline projects. Again, a different name for the plan under Bucket 3. And also the SEPs will be submitted to the Federal Restore Council for approval. Again, that ties back to the requirement that it be consistent with the comprehensive plan, and it's different from Bucket 1, where the MIPs will be submitted to Treasury for approval. One additional aspect that to keep in mind under Bucket 3 is there is a cap on infrastructure projects. It's capped at 25%, and the Treasury regulations does discuss and give a definition of infrastructure. Similar to Bucket 1, the next step here in Alabama is for the Alabama Council to finalize and then post its project selection process for public review. Now, how you submit projects for Bucket 1 and Bucket 3 is really just the same as I discussed for Bucket 2. Go and click on the project suggestion spot on our website, and it will give you the additional instructions on what to do. Again, please do print out the guide before you get started, and do collect your information in a Word document to cut and paste, and do please be very mindful of both the space limitations, the necessary attachments that must be uploaded, and the limitations for those attachments. And one of those, an example, is a budget for the project. But again, the website will prompt you at each field as to those limitations. Just please do check for those. So that is an overview. We wanted to post some contact information for questions both to the state of Alabama and to the Federal Council. You see my name and Hank Birch listed there, along emails and phone numbers, as well as Ben's information and Bethany's information. and we will do our best to either get you an answer or direct you to whoever would be most helpful with whatever questions you may have. And Bethany, I'm going to turn it back over, control back over to you at this point.
All right, thanks, Patty. So we're going to start the question and answer session. Put this up on the screen once more. Again, we'd love to hear your input, and you can email your responses to restorecouncil@restorethegulf.gov.
And one reason we wanted today to, we'll now go into questions that we receive from those who are on the webinar. We wanted to take some time to do that. Those who felt it was not enough time to have you read the questions and respond today, to give you some time to do that and consider those questions and respond by email. So we're going to use what time we have today to go over any questions that anyone has. It will take us a minute to pull up those questions, so if y'all give us a second. And for those of you who you're just now having a chance to quit listening and type, go ahead and give us whatever questions you may have.
All right, it looks like we don't have any questions at the moment, except for someone has asked us to put the slide back with the overall flow chart. Sure, we can do that. Again, use the control panel on the right-hand side of your screen to ask a question and hit send to all.
And Bethany, I apologize, I can't remember if we said this earlier, but the webinar today is being recorded. The one that we had on October 6th also recorded. The recordings of the webinar as well as this PowerPoint will be posted both the Federal Council site as well as the Alabama Council site, which will give you an opportunity as you need to go back and review any of the information we've had today. Again, both the Alabama site and the Federal site contain several fact sheets that you could go to that as you may have additional questions that you can refer back to. We've tried to keep today somewhat of an overview, somewhat broad, not to give too much detail and confuse everyone, but we wanted to try to hit the highlights and tell you how to get to more information. So give us just another second to look, review any questions that we may have, and again, any that may have any, please go ahead and type them now.
Alrighty, we have a question that asks, each council member gets to submit 5 proposals. Does that include the federal council members also? If so, are there any criteria on the federal council members?
Sure, I'll be happy to. This is Ben Skaggs. I'll be happy to speak to that. Yes, the federal council members, including the non-state members of that council, are to submit 5 project ideas. The criteria or focus areas for them are the same as they are for the state. So projects still are going to be focused on both habitat and water quality, must be foundational, sustainable, have a high degree of technical success or probability of success, and also must accrue benefit to community. So exactly the same for both state and federal members.
And I know this is where it gets so confusing in Alabama. Again, the federal council is comprised of the representatives for the 5 Gulf states and then 6 federal members. So that is the federal council. Of those 11 members, 10 submitting proposals, 5 each for the 50 that I mentioned. And again, that relates to bucket 2. The Alabama Council is authorized and has the duties to gather projects and then prepare the multi-year implementation plans and the state expenditure plans. So the Alabama Council, the 10-member council that consists of 2 state members and 8 local members, will be gathering project suggestions and ensuring eligibility of projects under Bucket 1 and Bucket 3. Okay, and we'll give another minute while we look for additional questions. If you'll hold on for a second, please.
So far, I think that's all we have. So we may pause for just a moment or two and see if anybody has any additional questions. If you do, type them in now. If not, we will conclude our webinar.
But we'll give a few minutes if you hear silence. So we'll let some folks type in case they're submitting something.
All right, we have a question about sending copies of the presentation to attendees, or if they can access it online.
And those will be made available on the Federal Council page of our alabamacoastalrestoration.org website. It will be tomorrow before everything is up, but I would hope before lunch tomorrow we'll have everything posted. And so we'll have, again, both the PowerPoint alone as well as the recorded webinars if you'd like to. I can't imagine I want to listen to us again, but if you'd like to, you can. But I really do want to express my appreciation to everyone who attended this afternoon. And again, although we didn't spend any additional time on that, please do take time to go back and look at the questions that the council is seeking input on. And after you've had some time to give those some consideration, do provide feedback to the council. And thank you. I know everybody's busy, but I appreciate your time this afternoon. And Ben and Bethany, on behalf of the state, I want to thank both of you as council staff for driving over to Alabama today so we could sit in one room and hopefully, handle any questions or help with technical issues. And I very much appreciate that. So thanks, everybody, and have a good afternoon.
Thanks, everyone. We appreciate your time.